All right, guys, let's get started. So, in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, 231, adequate notice of this regular meeting of the Planning Board of the Township of Franklin has been provided. If everyone could please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilman Chase,
Here.
Carl Houck,
Here.
Alex Karazi,
Here.
Cecile McIver,
Here.
Robert Metler,
Here.
Mustafis Manzare,
Here.
Charles Brown, Robert Thomas,
Here.
Jennifer Ragnow,
Here.
Godwin Amalola,
Here.
and Chairman Orsini.
Here. Okay, so our first item of business is the minutes from February 21st.
Move to approve if there's no discussion.
Second.
Councilman Chase,
Yes.
Carl Houck,
Yes.
Alex Karazi,
Yes.
Cecile McIver,
Yes.
Robert Metler,
Yes.
Mustafa Manzare,
Yes.
Jennifer Ragnow,
Yes.
Godwin Amalola,
Yes.
and Chairman Orsini.
Yes. So no resolutions tonight, so we'll move on to the vouchers. Planning Board Attorney Clarkin and Vignulo, March retainer, $833.33.
Move to approve.
Second.
Councilman Chase,
Yes.
Carl Houck,
Yes.
Alex Karazi,
Yes.
Cecile McIver,
Yes.
Robert Metler,
Yes.
Mustafa Manzare,
Yes.
Robert Thomas,
Yes.
Jennifer Ragnow,
Yes.
Godwin Amalola,
Yes.
Chairman Orsini.
Yes. Do we have Frank here for the L'Oreal extension? Oh, we got somebody that, all right, go ahead. Have our technical expert help you out.
Hello?
Doesn't sound good.
third one.
Now we have to get it on.
Always worried that there's nearly always one of them out of order.
I tried this.
The battery though.
Try the one on the podium here.
Hey, Mark. I can turn that out. This doesn't work.
Oh, they're working. I'm saying if those.
All right, much better.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark.
All right, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Board. Ruben Perez from the Law Office of Francis P. Linus. Our firm represents the applicant L'Oreal USA Products Incorporated with respect to a preliminary final site plan approval, which was memorialized in a resolution adopted by the Planning Board of the Township of Franklin on January 18th, 2017. The purpose of today's appearance before the Planning Board is we're requesting an extension of the period of protection for the approvals for a one-year period, just to provide some law under the Municipal Land Use Law 40:55D52, the zoning requirements applicable to preliminary approval first granted and all of the rights conferred upon the developer to develop the property, whether conditionally or otherwise, shall not be changed for a period of 2 years after the date on which the resolution of final approval is adopted. The Planning Board may extend the period of protection for the approval granted for an extension of 1 year, but not to exceed 3 extensions. We can open up to any questions that the Planning Board may have with respect to this extension application. We have with us today Mr. Bart Jones, who is the Vice President of Engineering of L'Oreal Products USA, for any specific questions that you may have.
Anybody from the board have?
Just so the board knows what is this for the addition?
The approval is for the construction of a 21,831 square foot addition.
Thank you. You may have said it, but I was doing technical duties.
Well, if there's no discussion, I'll move to approve this.
I would second.
Councilman Chase?
Yes.
Councilman Chase? Okay. Carl Hauck?
Yes.
Alex Crossy?
Yes.
Cecile McIver?
Yes, and I want to thank them for their donation of the plastic barrels for the rain barrel workshop for the Environmental Commission, since I'm also a member of that commission. That was very civically minded of you.
Robert Mettler?
Yes.
Mustafa Mansray?
Yes.
Charles Brown?
Yes.
Robert Thomas?
Yes.
And Chairman Orsini.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. So we can open up the meeting to public comments. I have a motion to do that.
Make a motion to open to the public at this time.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So this public portion is for anybody with a planning question or planning-related issue that's not the subject of hearing tonight.
See if that one's working.
This one.
Benjamin Guy, 35 Patton Drive. I wanted to ask a couple questions to the planning board. One is, what's the process and when is the actual master plan going to be approved during the, over the next couple months at all? The second thing is to ask a question about with the city council or township council, depending on what we're talking about, is the economic development plan that they actually came up with when they hired a consultant. Is that going to be integrated into the master plan? The actual suggestions as far as what's going to be improved for, you know, the residents as far as what they did recommendations-wise, is that going to be included in the master plan? And then the third thing is that ordinance-wise, is there any major ordinances that are going to be changing because of the increased development that is in certain areas that are going on around town? Looking at roadways planning or anything else that's going to be going into this master plan as we move forward in this town, because we've jumped from population density from about 40,000 up to about 65,000, projected about probably 68 to 70,000 probably by 2021, based on all the developments that are coming into town. And I'm just trying to see whether or not we're working through that plan, because with us building another school and actually hit with other taxes that are actually coming about, are we looking at additional improvements as far as roadways conditions or widening roads or anything else that is actually going on in the town itself? So that is pretty much my questions at this specific time frame, and I'll thank you, and I'll see you again too.
Get your last name again?
Guy.
Last name is Guy.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so all good questions. So master plan, I know we're, Mark,
Yep.
you're working on that, so.
Yeah, master plan we'll be working on this year. As far as improvements, roadways, things of that nature, we've hired a firm to assist us with the preparation of our transportation circulation plan. So they will be looking at that as far as roadways and public transportation. We'll be doing an analysis of where we stand and what recommendations they'll be making in that regard.
And that is part of the master plan? That's
Yes.
an element of the master plan. That's the one that we outsourced to a consultant with expertise in towns like ours and in Somerset County in general, so.
And then the question about the economic development, it's really twofold. There was a economic development study that was prepared that will be incorporated in some manner into the master plan as well. One of the main recommendations that came out of that study was to evaluate some changes to the Hamilton Street zone and also the changes to the corporate business M1 and M2 zones. This board previously discussed, at least in general concept, some of those changes. Those master plan amendments are going to be forthcoming in the next few months.
Thanks, Mark. Anybody else from the public wishing to speak?
Seeing no one coming forward, I would move that this public hearing be closed.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So we go on to our hearings. And the first one is SM Abazid, PLN 18-00001. That's what I keep hearing. Just want the night off. No other attorneys in this town? I guess not. Not that you'd recommend, right? Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Peter Lanford appearing on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Abu Zaid. The application before this board this evening is a minor subdivision and a site plan application. The minor subdivision is to take the existing property of 17,500 square feet and to create two lots, one of 5,000 square feet and the other of 12,500 square feet. The second part of the application is to develop the 12,500 square foot lot into a building for commercial use. In 2005, Mr. Abu Zaid purchased this property. At that time, there was an old commercial building that was in pretty bad shape, and he purchased it with the intent to develop it in 2005. He demolished the existing building, and as he was preparing some plans essentially similar to that which is before the board this evening, this property was placed in the redevelopment zone. Leewood Redevelopment was designated the redeveloper of the property, which then really precluded Mr. Abu Zaid from developing the property. At that time, he negotiated or attempted to negotiate with Leewood to sell the entire property, and Leewood said, well, that is not in my immediate plans. I'm developing at the other end of my project, and I don't want to buy your property at this time, and when I'm ready, we'll figure it out. And this went on for quite a while. Meanwhile, Mr. Abu Zaid continued to own the property and continued to pay taxes on the property. As a result of certain discussions that took place in the last few years, it was determined that what Leewood Development needed for their redevelopment project was not all of the applicant's property, but basically 5,000 square feet of the property, and that he did not need the property that fronted along Route 27. As a result of discussions with the redevelopment agency, it was agreed, and Mr. Abu Zaid agreed, that if the subdivision were to be granted, we would sell the 5,000 square foot lot that we are creating to Leewood for the purpose of their redevelopment, which piece of property I think is basically used for a road and buffer, but no residential development. And that the remaining 12,500 square feet would then be released from the redevelopment area. And that was in fact accomplished, and so now we are back here this evening to seek site plan approval and subdivision approval. I have Mr. Abu Zaid, who I don't think I need to call this evening, but if the board has any questions of him, he'd be happy to answer them. I do have the architect to describe the building, and I do have our site engineer to describe the site plan and the variances that are associated in conjunction with this application. As a further aside, a couple years ago, this board heard a site plan application by a gentleman named Mr. Doshi, which is just further down the street on Route 27, which had a commercial building similar in size and a lot similar in size to this property. And basically, when we met with Mr. Healy and the redevelopment agency, and then ultimately with the township staff, we were sort of charged to say, well, the board a few years ago approved the Doshi application, try to keep this in concert with that and consistent with what we approved, because there were variances that were granted in that application. And obviously, the fact that the board granted variances some years ago doesn't mean you have to do them tonight, but basically it was the intent to try to mirror, at least in size and scope, consistent with that application, which I think we in fact did do. Having said all of that, I will call as my first witness Ms. Chefmaker.
So Peter, what kind of commercial, commercial use building?
Yeah.
And what's the commercial use intended to be?
We don't have any users. It's basically a spec building. And she'll explain, it's about 3,600 square feet, which can be used by 1 to 3 tenants, but we don't have any particular user as of today.
Okay. So it's not big enough for like a McDonald's or something like that?
There's no drive-through, there's nothing like that. It's basically a Verizon store. It could be a pizza parlor, or, what is a fairly typical building along a highway for a commercial use, but it's not intended as a high-traffic user. And there's actually limited parking on the site, so.
Okay.
Good evening.
11 spaces.
And raise your right hand for me. Swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
State your name, spell your last name for the record, and give us your address, please.
Susan Chefmaker, Scheffmaker, and 262 Redmond Street, New Brunswick.
Are you a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I am.
No, she's an architect.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're a licensed architect. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Ms. Chefmaker, you prepared the architectural plans, the floor plans and elevations for the subject application, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And you heard my opening comments, which referenced a previous application. And in designing your plans, did you have an opportunity to look at the size of the previous the Doshi application, the building that was approved, and the size of that building?
Yes, I did.
All right. Can you briefly describe, I'm sorry, you have an exhibit upon which you're going to base your testimony?
I do.
And those are colored renderings of the elevations of the building, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And it is also the floor plans for the building itself.
It is.
Can we mark that, Mr. Vignolo, as A1?
Yes, sir. If you could add the application number, docket number actually on that, which is PLN-18 00001. That's 4 zeros followed by a 1. Like
Yeah,
5-digit numbers.
I've been fighting the good fight to eliminate zeros for years, and I haven't been able to do it.
Okay.
I doubt we're going to have 10,000 applications in 2018. So.
Should be so lucky. I should be so lucky. Ms. Chefmaker, going to Exhibit A1, the left side of it are the elevations of the building, is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you briefly describe the building and what it will look like from all sides?
Absolutely. So the application proposes to construct a retail plaza that is 105 feet wide by 35 feet deep and 28 feet high. It is anticipated to be divided in up to 3 tenant units of approximately 1,200 square feet each. And each unit will have a street side entrance as well as a rear parking entrance. The plaza will be constructed using brick and stucco with vinyl faced aluminum and a combination of AZAC vinyl trim detailing. So there will be an architectural shingle roof and an aluminum storefront window and door system. So the brick that I've selected is to be Glengarry, which is a golden sunset, and I have the sample here in front of me as an illustration of what that coloration is. And the upper and lower stuccos will be complementary tones to pick up the variations in the brick, and those colors are the bottom 2 colors on the top right of the board. So each tenant space will be accented on the front by a dormer roof profile and vertical brick piers.
Thank you.
Over each front entry door is a 15 square foot sign panel with 3 gooseneck lights over each, and each sign panel is framed by a proportionate stucco panel of similar coloration and materials to the facade. So the storefront window framing will be a dark bronze anodized aluminum, as well the fascia at the face of the roof dormer profiles. The rear facade will mirror the front with a lower, smaller entry roof profiles over each of the rear entry doors. And the base brick and the vertical piers are continued at this facade as well. yet the corner columns will be a fiberglass in the creamy beige as opposed to the brick piers, which you'll see at the top right of that board is the lighter color. So the side facades show the roof to be at a 612 pitch of 45 degrees, with the roof dormers shown at the front and the entry roofs at the rear. The west facade has a double storefront window, and the east facade does not.
And the west facade is the facade facing Oak, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the plaza has been designed to accommodate a variety of retail tenant uses. It is used a lot of warm and natural colors, and the scale is such to be inviting at both the pedestrian level as well as to passing car traffic. The front, rear, and side elevations have a level of detail and a variety of materials and finishes that I believe it offers ample visual interest from all vantage points.
Now, the sign panels that you have, since we don't have any tenants, we basically allow sign panels that would be consistent with the zoning ordinance, and when the tenant comes in, they can, as part of their fit-out, apply for sign permits, and we're not looking for any sign variances. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, the interior spaces are basically broken down into potential of 3 spaces, all of equal size. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And besides that, there is going to be 1 mechanical room in the building to handle mechanical equipment inside,
That's correct.
and that would be in the space closest or the easterly side of the property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And where will we be handling the air conditioning units and the condensing units?
There will be exterior condensing units on the rear of the right facade, right up against the utility room.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Just so I understand, the elevation, the picture's in the middle of the two parts there. That faces what street?
The left side faces Oak Street. The right side faces another property.
Okay, the side that faces Oak Street, this is basically a corner property. Is there anything that could be done to make that a little less plain? It is, at this point, not much of a street, but it is a very visible section of the building since it's on a corner. And it's being treated as a building side. That's what I'm saying. Can it be treated a little more decoratively as though it's a minor front, if I could use that?
I believe that facade would never be seen directly flat on, because coming around the corner, you have a rotating view of the building. So you'll see the dormers at the front, you'll be able to see the roofs at the rear, the patterning at the side of the roof gable, as well as the piers, the pilaster, the column. There's a cornice going along the top between the roof line and the base, as well as the brick base and the windows.
So
It's basically a solid wall.
no, not on. There's 2 windows. Aren't there 2 windows on that side?
There are 2 windows on that side, yeah.
Okay, you're familiar with project on Pierce Street, Investors Bank, and
I am eminently familiar with that
Right.
project.
the buildings on Pierce Street were actually the rear of the building, and they had the variance granted to put signs so that they had a different kind of an appearance than the rear of a building. I just think it could be dressed up a little bit. I don't.
Would it make sense to move those windows toward the middle of that facade, that side facade, and maybe make the windows a little bit bigger?
Yes, the windows could be moved, a window could be added. We could put some trim or detailing around the perimeter of the window as an accent to the window.
I don't think you'd want to add additional signage, Mr. Thomas. It's not a large building, and
I understand. I'm not proposing a sign. I was using that as an example. Okay. Maybe the window trim would be very helpful. Something added to offset the solidness.
Something like shutters and a window box underneath.
Even that, maybe. I don't know. I'm not
I could add some detailing along the cornice line that might break up that linear line across the roof line.
That would probably be very helpful too. I don't know what, maybe you just propose something and let Mark approve or however you want to work it. I don't mean this to be a big hang-up, but, and I know that this is a smaller building and everything, but I'm starting to really get upset at the buildings that we've approved in the past that are not oriented toward the front of the buildings, not oriented toward the street, and then the general public sees a rear wall or a side wall that's nothing but cement, concrete, whatever.
We'll be glad to address that. And just to clarify one other point, Oak Place is not going to be going, as far as I know, unless something has changed, doesn't go into the Leawood development. It's going to be that little stub, and that's the end of it. So it's not going to be really a public street that will service anything, but it will still be there. So you're not going to get any additional traffic other than who's coming into our parking lot, and I believe on the other side there is a house that has a driveway, so those would be the only people using
What
it.
was described to me seems like it would be fine.
Thank you.
So, as long as we're on this topic, and since it's in the staff report anyway, Mark, your report had a fair number of comments about the
Yeah.
architecturals. Do you
Yeah,
want
well,
to take this opportunity to address any of that?
Yeah, I will, and actually, I think the applicant has actually revised it in their revised plans. Their original plans that they had submitted, that was the subject of my memo, did not have the finished, around the three other sides of the building to the degree that these plans even do. The original plan had a flat roof, which wasn't consistent with the design standards. These, in my opinion, address those standards. I think the conversation that was just had to add a little bit more to the facade facing Oak Place does it even more. So comments 1A and 1B, again, with the changes that the board discussed, I think they're consistent with the design standards. I do have some questions, not questions, just if the architect could describe the signage, the building mounted signage, and then I think there was a comment here about the freestanding sign and having it be consistent with the architectural design of the building.
Okay. We'll deal with the freestanding sign with the site engineer, but I think we can do the building mounted signs. We're proposing 3 signs, assuming that there are 3 tenants, one above each of the tenant spaces. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they meet the minimum or the ordinance requirements for the size of sign.
Correct, 15 square feet.
They're actually less than the required because the ordinance is 30 square feet per tenant. So, but yours are even less than that at this time?
Correct.
And how are they lit?
There's 3 gooseneck lights over each sign.
Okay, and do you have an idea of what the composition of those signs will be?
I'm assuming a flat panel that's being mounted onto the stucco base panel behind it.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, I have a question for the architect, and I think you may like this question. The ordinance, in my opinion, the back side of the building that faces the parking lot and that has a customer entrance, our ordinance requires an extremely small sign to announce the store. So when you look at the elevation that's at the top, I forget what it is, but it's like a 2x2 sign or something, I think kind of absurd. In your opinion, would it look better architecturally if the sign was allowed to be larger, perhaps over the door, rather than this tiny little sign to the side of the door?
Definitely opportunity to make it a nicer sign by making it a bit larger, yes.
How big is the sign? So the sign that's on the front of the building is 15 square feet, correct?
Correct.
That is still relatively small. Your typical storefront sign is 30 square feet, foot
Right,
high,
the sign
10
at the
foot wide.
front is 7'6" by 2 foot.
And that would fit underneath the dormer, over the door and underneath the dormer on those, over those rear store entrances?
Yes, it would.
Your opinion, would that look better from an aesthetic and an architectural perspective?
Yes, it'll help remove some of that blank wall space.
I would recommend the board may want to consider granting a variance. I think it could be a C2 variance. It's a better design than what the zoning allows. And I think as part of our ordinance, I think, that comes out in the master plan, we should be looking at things like that. I think the requirement's a little,
So in other
Way
words, you
too
want to
strict.
grant us variance so that they have less than,
so they'd be allowed to have on that, the elevation on the top, that's the rear entrance that faces the rear parking lot, to allow 15 square foot signs for over each of the retail entrances, similar to what's on the front. And again, 15 square feet is still very modest in size.
I mean, that's kind of consistent with what Bob was saying.
Yes.
So would they still have 15 square feet on the side facing Route 27?
Yes.
Yeah, because you need signs there to advertise the businesses to passers-by.
Yeah, and I think the way that the front, the facade that faces Route 27, I think the signage kind of fits and works. And I see no reason why that we can't allow 15 square feet for the rear entrances as well.
Yeah.
All I have for the architect.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I figured we'd get that out of the way. Any other board questions for the architect? I mean, in general, obviously, we're not architects, but I think the gist is that, you've done something since the first review that seems to address most of the things.
Yeah, we did. We had a meeting with Mr. Healy, and we reviewed it, and I do think we addressed most of his comments. Again, we were trying to model back to another building, and I think the other building size-wise is comparable, but I think aesthetically, this building will be significantly more aesthetic than the other building that was approved down the street, some of their choices of colors. Well, I'll leave it at that.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, one more question. Again, this goes back to the original plan. Screening of exterior mechanical equipment, I believe the new plans address those. Can you describe how the new plans address that comment?
That'll be the,
It's on I believe it's addressed on the architectural floor plans, no?
we're doing, the mechanical equipment is inside. There'll be outside equipment. The engineer will deal with
Okay,
that.
all right, thank you. You're right.
My next witness is Mr. Jaworski. Do we have to open up to the public? I'm sorry. Okay. There isn't any.
Not till the end.
Do you raise your right hand for me? Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I
If
do.
you could state your name, spell your last name for the record, and provide your address, please.
Yes, Joseph Jaworski, Jaworski, 245 Main Street, Chester, New Jersey.
And then you're a licensed architect in the state of New
No.
Jersey?
Licensed engineer.
Sorry, engineer.
Professional engineer, yes.
Mixing up my experts. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Jaworski, your firm prepared the site plan, which is the subject of this application.
Yes, we did.
Okay. First of all, can you describe the subject property as it sits today?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my exhibit, which I'll mark as A2, is basically a colored version of the site plan that was submitted. So it's a landscaping over top and it's colored. And I'll mark that as A2.
And if you could
And I'll
also add
need
the
that.
docket number for me, it's PLN-18-4 zeros and a 1.
Got it. All right, and
Thank you.
this, again, is a site plan rendering dated 3/2/18, and this is a color version of the plan. Route 27 is along the bottom of the page, running parallel to the bottom. North is to the top, Oak Place is off to the left, and the subject property is in the center. As Mr. Lanford pointed out, the entire property, which extends to the top of the page, is 17,500 square feet. The proposal is basically to subdivide the front 12,500 for Mr. Abazid's application. The rear 5,000 square feet, which is colored with the dark green as the wooded area, will remain, and that'll be subdivided off to become part of the redevelopment. So the proposal, basically, as was described, includes a single-story building, 3,675 square feet. That's the tan rectangular box, which is closer to Route 27. The rear of the site will have a parking lot, which is colored in gray, and there'll be a single line of parking, 11 spaces along the back of the building, a sidewalk, and then the building itself. I'm sure you're familiar with the property. The existing property actually has 3 driveways. There's 2 driveways on Oak Place, and there is 1 curb cut off of Route 27. So though the Route 27 driveway will be closed off completely, and the 2 driveways will be eliminated, and 1 single driveway will be placed furthest away from the intersection, which will serve the rear parking area.
And we do need a DOT permit to close the driveway along Route 27,
Yes.
is that correct?
That's correct.
And-
Anytime you touch the DOT right away, you do need a permit. We have submitted that application to DOT. It's really a formality. DOT likes it when you close driveways on their highway and you have alternate access. So we don't anticipate any issue with that. So again, the building itself, as Susan pointed out, could be divided into 3 separate tenants. We have access from the front sidewalk to the front of the building, which was just discussed with the signage over each door. And then in the back, a similar sidewalk between the building and the parking lot. The parking will include 11 spaces. All the way to the west side will be a ADA handicap accessible space with a ramp that'll come up to the sidewalk to access the building itself. Your ordinance requires 1 space per 250 square feet of gross building area. When you do that calculation, it comes out to 15 spaces. We were able to put in 11 spaces of complying size, plus which includes the ADA space. So the applicant does request a variance for those 4 spaces short of what the ordinance requires. As far as I'll go through the variances at the end. As far as the site grading and drainage, basically now the undeveloped site generally drains to the south, just overland flow, and goes into the DOT system, which is the storm system, which is in Route 27. Because we are developing in this, now paving it, putting a building on it, that increases the stormwater runoff, so we have to mitigate that. By mitigating that, we are including an underground detention basin, which will be solid pipes below the parking lot in the rear. All the stormwater will be directed to that area, and then we have an outlet structure which will detain that water so that the peak flow matches or is less than the existing flow for the 210 and 100-year storm, which is required by your ordinance. That will include the roof drainage as well as all the drainage from the parking lot itself. So that will be mitigated, and a report was done for that and submitted to your engineering department for review. The lighting and landscaping, you could see the landscaping on the site. Basically includes two large honey locust shade trees in the front, and then a series of lower shrubs and bushes around the side. We do have a complete row of arborvitae, evergreen arborvitae, along the eastern side of the property. So that'll be right along the property line. And I think there's a question about the condensers for the air conditioning, which will probably be placed right in the northeast corner. So they will be screened by those arborvitae, anything looking to the east. We can certainly add some more screening in front and back of them to make sure that those are not visible from the street or from the parking lot. The trash will be taken care of with a masonry trash enclosure and gate, which is in the northeast corner of the site. That'll be large enough to have both a dumpster for garbage and as well as recycling. So I'll take care of that. The aisle in the back is wide enough for 2-way traffic, and then the perpendicular parking spots will be head into the back of the building.
Just a couple quick questions before you go on. The masonry enclosure, we will in fact use the same brick materials
Yes.
as the building so that it will match the existing building, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Now, just briefly with respect to the sidewalks. Right now, are there any sidewalks at all on that property?
On the property itself, no. There are sidewalks on the front. There are some disrepairs to those sidewalks, and we propose to repair them accordingly.
So there'll be a repaired and functional sidewalk along Route 27?
That's correct.
Okay. In addition, then there's From that sidewalk, we have a sidewalk onto our property, and a potential customer who would walk to the property will be able to enter the property via a sidewalk and either access the front of the building or the back of the building, as the case may be, via sidewalks.
That's correct. The lighter tan on each side of the building indicates that concrete sidewalk, as well as along the left side along Oak Place, which will be able to get to the rear of the building as well.
Okay, and although we have a deficiency of parking, I've described Oak Place. I mean, if it really got to a situation where all 11 parking spaces were taken, there is an ability to park in the public right-of-way for at least a couple cars along Oak Place. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that, as I indicated earlier, is a road to nowhere?
Yes.
Okay. You can continue.
Okay. Lastly, just the lighting for the site will really be accomplished by lights on the building itself. Various wall sconces will be placed on a building, which will light up the sidewalks around it and provide light into the parking lot in the rear. There was a comment from your engineer about some potential spillage of the one light that's on the western side, and we can certainly look at that and either shield it or use a smaller light so that we don't have too much spillage on that side. Utility-wise, basically all the utilities are available. We have gas is available on Oak Place, so that'll come in off of Oak. The electric and communications will come in on the eastern side to the right side of the building. The water connection will also come in that similar area on the east side of the building. And sanitary sewer is along Oak Place, so the sewer will basically come out the rear of the building and then tie into the sanitary line on Oak Place. We did go over, Susan went over the signage, so that basically will be complying signs once we know who the tenants are on the front and the rear.
Is there a proposal for any freestanding sign?
Yes, sorry, I was just going to get to that. There is one freestanding sign which is located right up in the southeast corner of the building. That sign, there's a generic detail on our plan on sheet 13, basically just shows a panel for 3 tenants. We can certainly stipulate that sign can be designed in accordance with the materials to match the building as well as the trash enclosure. That sign will comply as far as area is concerned. It is, we do require a setback variance for that sign in that it is only set 2 feet off of the property line, where the requirement for the sign setback is 10 feet. It should be noted on that vein that the actual right-of-way line is about 18 feet from the curb line. So in essence, the sign is set 20 feet back from the curb line. Your ordinance requires 10 feet from the property line itself. That's why we need the variance. But you can see the green area, sidewalk, additional green. So the sign physically is set back about 20 feet from the curb line of Route 27. As far as the other nonconformities, obviously the lot area in your zone, you require 20,000 square foot minimum. The existing lot is 17,500. As Mr. Lanford explained, subdividing off the back 5,000 to be in compliance with the redevelopment leaves 12,500 in the front. Technically, a relief is needed because it's less than that 20,000 square feet. The front yard setback in this zone is required to be 20 feet. Again, the building is set back 10 feet from the Route 27 right-of-way line and 10 feet from the Oak Place right-of-way line. Variance relief is needed for that just because of that setback, but again, you have a large area, another 18 feet to the curb line on 27. So in essence, you have about, you have 18 plus 10, so you have 28 foot. The building is set back 28 feet from the actual curb line, but relief is needed for that. As I stated before, the parking, 11 spaces are proposed, 15 are required per your ordinance, so relief is needed for those 4 spaces. And the impervious coverage in this zone is allowed to be 80%. This plan is slightly over, it's at 85%. However, the mitigation is provided with the drainage. There is no drainage on the site right now, no mitigation. This development will fully mitigate the runoff with underground detention, which will eventually go back to the DOT system where it goes today. And the last relief is needed for a loading space. Your ordinance requires one loading space for this size building. No specific loading space is proposed on this. This is a very small building. If it's divided into 3 tenants, that's even smaller, about 1,000 square feet each. The deliveries will be box trucks, UPS type trucks, which certainly can pull in the lot and pull into a space. So a formal loading zone for a tractor trailer is really not needed. And a tenant in this type of situation rarely would use a tractor trailer for deliveries. There'll be smaller box trucks. So, but relief is required because that's a condition of your ordinance for this.
One last point I think we forgot to cover very briefly. At the subdivision line at the rear of our property, will there be a fence constructed?
Yes, we have a 6-foot-high board-on-board fence along the entire northern property line, and we actually carried that around to the east. There's an existing fence on the east side. We're going to carry that around and connect, so it will be screened with a fence in that entire yard area.
Okay. In conjunction with this application, you've had an opportunity to review a planning report from Mr. Zelenik dated March 13th, 2018.
Yes.
And there were a couple minor comments with respect to in the report. Can we comply with those comments?
Yes, all of the comments in our report are not a problem. We can certainly comply with them.
Did you, hold on, Judge, did you need it to, a couple of places mentioned section 222 trees. I mean, I don't know what was on the lot, how treed it was, or what more you guys could do in terms of planting.
We will owe you some money for tree replacement.
Okay.
We just have to work out the number. I think there was a discrepancy
So you
between.
can comply with that.
Mr. Zelnick, I think, wanted $420, and I think Mr. Healy wanted a little bit more, but I think we'll go with Mr. Zelnick's number because it's lower. But we'll figure out what
I'm sure the Shade Tree Commission would like Mr. Healy's number. Maybe we can split the difference.
No, we'll figure out what we owe you, and obviously we will pay you what we owe you. I don't think there's any opportunity to really add any more trees on the site itself.
No, I think, what we've done, especially in the front, we got 2 trees, but you don't want to put too many more to block it, and certainly the screening along the side, so the difference will be made up with the contribution.
Okay.
Okay. And also, just for the record, Mr. Zelnick's report indicates that we don't have DOT approval. We've addressed that. The county has approved it, and Soil Conservation has approved this project. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And Mr. Healy's report you've reviewed, and have you, at least in your opinion, addressed any of the comments he had concerning landscaping, lighting, and things of that nature?
Yes, I believe so. Between Susan and my testimony, I think we have addressed
I think
it.
they've addressed most. If there are any, I'm assuming you'll agree to comply with whatever is not.
Correct.
Going through, it
Yes.
looks like you've complied with both the site plans and the architecturals, the vast majority of my comments.
Thank you.
Hey, you talked about maybe the possibility of, for instance, a Verizon store. All the Verizon stores I've been to, I've seen more than 3 cars in their parking lot. I'm concerned that you only have slightly more than 3-4 spots at the most per store here, if you're going to have 3 retail establishments. Why can't you enlarge the parking lot to the, what is that, the west? The 3,000 square feet
Where the green is.
where the green is,
To the north.
to the north,
That's-
okay.
Yeah, that's the subdivision of the 5,000 square feet that'll go to the redevelopment.
All right, so less would go to the redevelopment, but you'd comply with the required number of parking spaces. You would have the 20,000 square feet as opposed to the 17,000 square feet. All that would go away.
Ms. MacGyver,
Yes.
Leewood needs all of that 5,000 square feet as part of their redevelopment project. If it was our druthers, we'd keep the whole 5,000 square feet and develop it, but unfortunately, they need that as part of their redevelopment plan, so we have no choice but to convey to them that 5,000 square feet, and we can't use it. It's that simple. The other question with a Verizon store normally is not only going to take one of those spaces 1,000 square feet. Their stores are substantially bigger. So if you have something like a Verizon store, they'll probably take two or the entire building, which means there'll be adequate parking for them.
Okay.
Was there any thought given to a pedestrian connection to Leewood?
It wasn't asked of us by Leewood, nor was it asked of us by the redevelopment. I guess if there is a need for it or desire, it can be accomplished, but I think Mr. Healy may best address that.
It's tough to say exactly because we have to see what the exact layout of that portion of the Leewood development is. But, I mean, it could be as simple as putting a gate in that portion of the where the sidewalk could eventually go.
Could you put something, attach something to the property that is going back to Leewood that should X people decide that has some value, that they would put a walk-in along that side that would connect to the parking lot at least?
Well, certainly with, obviously Leewood would be developing the portion to the, I guess that's to the north. And they would be responsible for doing their, within their site and also within, if the plan, because they'll be coming back to the planning board, any portion that's within the township right-of-way, even if it's in front of their site, we could make Leewood, as we have in the past actually, do some pedestrian improvements. So I think the only thing really, I think at this point, the only missing piece is just to make sure they don't have a fence that's going to get in the way. Oak Place will dead end, pretty much right where that green starts. So there will be a fence eventually that goes across. Well, that's the other thing too, is the timing of that. We can work that out. I think the condition can be that we'll have to work that out with the applicant and have Abazit will have to do the most that he can do to accommodate for future pedestrian connection. We can work that out.
Right, I just wouldn't like to see it get lost in the shuffle
No,
because
it's a
I
good
think
comment.
with what Leewood's doing, you have the potential for
Bob,
a lot of use
you're
for something.
planning.
Yeah, it would be in our interest to make a pedestrian connection. Obviously, we don't know where, when, or why, but if Leewood were to develop that and came to a plan and said, we'd like to connect to your property, my client would be more than happy to work with them because it would be in our best interest.
If you're anticipating that overflow parking would go along Oak Place, are there any light poles? Because it gets dark early in the wintertime. Are you going to have any lighting for that?
That's a public right-of-way. I do not know if there's any streetlights out there now, but that would be a public right-of-way.
I think that needs to be looked. There should be some lighting there in case people do wind up parking there.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is we had some lighting on the side of the building that Mr. Zelnick said we should cut back because it spills over into the public right-of-way. Perhaps the answer is maybe we should light up that side of the building. I don't know if you need for that small strip a light pole in the public right-of-way, which the town then has to maintain. But I think we could put some lighting on the side of the building, which would make it better.
That's what we have now. We could certainly, then that's what the engineer asked, that we maybe cut that back, but it does light up that part of the road.
I could see cutting it back if you weren't going to have people parking there. But if people are going to be parking there, then for safety reasons, you really need the lighting.
Yep, I agree.
And we'd be happy to do it. But I don't think you need a light pole. We can light off the building.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any chance, I know you're not de facto proposing that people park on Oak Street, but I mean, if in practicality they will, it's probably better to have it lit somewhat.
I agree.
I have a question about, there's a lot of bicycle activity in the area. So what about providing bicycle parking on the site, number one? And number two, the access for pedestrians coming from the east, I think is ill-placed. It isn't logical that a pedestrian will walk that far just to walk back up to the eastmost entrance to one of the buildings. They would simply cut across the grass, creating a track there. So why not place it more central to allow people from the east to have access to all three stores as opposed to walking to the intersection, which rarely ever happens?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think you're referring maybe to having a connection over to here, which we can certainly add. This connection here, I would propose we keep that. that basically is a ramp that gives ADA accessibility out to the right-of-way.
Right.
So that's why that's there, but I agree. We could certainly add another access here. And as far as the bicycle racks, these sidewalks in the front are rather wide, so I think a couple bike racks there would be fine. That
All
would
right,
work.
thanks.
Any other board questions?
I have no further witnesses.
Okay, great. We could open to the public, I guess.
Make a motion to open to the public at this time.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody from the public wishing to speak on this application?
Seeing no one come forward, I move to close to the public at this time.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Without any other board comments, any other comments from you? If not, we'll go ahead.
Just real quickly, Mr. Abazid has lived with this site for the last 13 years, and we've worked very hard to come up with a plan that fits and also satisfies the needs of the redeveloper in that area. And I would respectfully request that the board grant the site plan approval, subdivision approval, and the related variances as testified to by Mr. Jaworski.
I'll make a motion to approve this application. And Peter, do you have any
I've got most of the conditions that they've agreed to.
with the conditions that we've mentioned? Second.
Second.
Councilman Chase,
Yes.
Laurel Hauk,
Yes.
Cecile McIver,
Yes.
Robert Mettler, Mustafa Manzre,
Yes.
Charles Brown,
Yes.
Robert Thomas.
Yes, good luck with the project because I think it's a substantial improvement of what's there.
Jennifer Ragnow,
Yes.
Chairman Orsini.
Yes, and I think, constrained as you were, I think you did a really nice job.
Thank you. It's my professionals worked pretty hard to try to make it all fit, make it look good.
Thank you. Have a good evening. You too. Thanks, Peter. Okay, our last hearing of the night is Brian Kay, PLN 14-00016, applicant seeking relief from tree mitigation and provision of sidewalk approval.
Okay, if you could just stand for a second. If you could raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're going to provide is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If you could state your name, spell your last name, and give us your address for the record, please.
My first name is Brian, B-R-I-A-N. My last name is K-A-Y-E, 438 Gerard Avenue, Franklin Township, Somerset.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. I wish Mr. Landfleet was by my side, but unfortunately I'm alone tonight. So on April 5th, 2017, my lawyer and I came in front of the board and we presented a plan to plant 124 trees on a subdivision right here in town. The planning board approved the plan and asked me to do the planting by the end of the fall planting season. We proposed to plant different species, and on November 10th, my attorney then, Mr. Landfleet, sent notice to the township via Mr. Healy that we had completed the planting and we were able to plant 127 trees. Unfortunately, we had to deviate from the species that we proposed because when we proposed them, we had no idea what would be available during the planting season. I gave the board, each member, a list of what we proposed and what we ended up planting. We were given some guidelines. We were asked to choose some of the native plants to Franklin Township, which we did. We were asked to choose some plants that would provide privacy to the neighbors, which we did. And I gave you a comprehensive list of what we ended up planting, 127 in all. I'm sure somebody would ask me the question as to why we deviated from the proposal. When we proposed the 124 trees, we had no idea of what would be available. I can show you proof tonight Mr. Chairman and members of the board, that I went as far as Tennessee to get those trees. I shopped in Pennsylvania, right here in New Jersey, and eventually we were able to get majority of the trees in upstate New York. I had them trucked all the way to New Jersey for substantial cost, and by November 10th, we had planted all 127. I'm sure if you look at the original plan and the revised plan, I would get the question as to why we planted the trees the way we did. If you look back at the history of the lot, this was a heavily wooded lot. Unfortunately, most of the trees were dead trees, but there were heavy roots, really big and thick roots on the lot. And when the professionals started digging, we realized that we couldn't plant the trees where they were supposed to be, where we had proposed. So what we did was we planted the trees around the perimeter of lots 6.03 and 6.04. I did my best to provide privacy to the neighbors, and in addition, I also took out a permit to add 6-foot fencing all around the perimeter. So we have done due diligence. The other thing I want to point out very briefly is the fact that, as I said, most of the trees are dead. I have sent pictures to Mr. Healy over the last couple of months showing the danger to myself, to the property, and the neighbors. In the last storm we had, 2 of the trees literally fell to the middle of Hamilton. Really big trees fell in the middle of Hamilton. The snowplow came by, just pushed them to the sidewalk and blocked my driveway. I called the township, they told me it's my responsibility. I called the county, they told me it's my responsibility. And eventually I had to take care of them. If you go to the site now, there are trees that are in real danger. Every time we have a windstorm or rain, I really worry about what would happen if one of those trees fell on the house. Of course, I'm really, really scared to touch any of the trees, so I am not going to cut any trees. But I really want the board to take note that some of the trees around the house are a danger to the house and a danger to life. The other thing I'm asking the board for tonight, when we came in front of the board, Mr. Lanfried and I voluntarily proposed that I would replace the sidewalk in front of my house on Hamilton. I wanted to do that because I live right there. I wanted to make the neighborhood nice. I thought I could afford it. But I have to tell you, in the last year, I have gone through a really, really difficult, perhaps the most difficult period of my life. So this was supposed to be a 6-month project, build a house, sell it, and get out of there fast. It's been a year and 4 months, and it's still not done. I still can't finish the house. Some of the problems we run into very briefly. At the beginning, we had a stop work order for Mr. Healy for about 4 months. That really cost me a lot of money. And then when we started, there was a lot of chaos. The excavator came in and dug the foundation hole 3 feet too deep. That cost me over $25,000 to repair that problem. I know it's not anybody's problem, it's mine, but I'm just trying to show how I got to the situation. On top of that, the township asked me to put up a bond of $15,750, a lot of money for me. I took out a loan, a home equity loan on my house, $250,000. I've blown through that. I went into my 401. I took out $100,000. I've gone through that. I am just at a loss as to where to get any more money. So that's why I'm coming in front of the board and saying, I propose to do the sidewalk, but unfortunately, I just cannot. I wanted to do a good deed for the neighborhood, but I cannot. I honestly don't have the means to do it anymore. It kills me to have to come back, but I honestly cannot. Maybe I should pause for any questions.
How much does it cost to repair the sidewalk?
The estimates I've gotten, well, not to repair. I said I would replace the sidewalk.
Replace, yes.
It would cost me over $10,000, the estimate I got. Just to do the depressed curb in front of the driveway, which is about 14 feet, cost me $2,700. So just imagine if I have to do, 100 feet, roughly? There was no requirement for me to do the sidewalk. I voluntarily said I will do it because it's really in bad shape, but
Well, this board has been requesting sidewalks because of children walking to school. We've been requesting sidewalks of just about all the developers that are coming before us. And as far as your losses, I mean, we all sympathize with your losses, but those were things that we certainly had no control over. And because you had a loss doesn't mean that we should be giving you relief from something that we're making all the developers do, like a sidewalk.
Can I just say something? There is a sidewalk there. It wasn't required of me to do it. I volunteered to do it because it's in bad shape.
If you hadn't volunteered to do it, you would have been required to do it by this board. We are requiring sidewalks of all the developers.
And then once it's memorialized in the resolution, you've agreed to it, now, you come into us for relief. So, let me just say something about the trees. So, I remember the first time you came in with the tree mitigation plan, and you caught me on a very good night. I was in a great mood, and for some reason, I did not give you too much of a hard time with your contractor, who apparently could not avoid some demarcation of the trees to not clear cut the site. And mistakes happen, and so I was willing to believe that this was a mistake, a very large mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. And we approved a mitigation plan at the time that I thought, if executed properly, would have restored the woods eventually to something similar to what they were. I don't see a need or a reason to deviate from that. I'm looking at what the TRC has given me here in the review, and what you've done is just plant a bunch of trees around the perimeter of the site for screening, which is great, but it's not the intent of what we asked you to do. It seems to me you make some poor choices when it comes to contractors. Your guy who cleared the site might have been the same guy that dug your foundation, because a little overzealous, right? So again, I mean, I sympathize with all your financial difficulties, but I don't see a reason to give you CO for anything you're building. I mean, you probably want that, and yet you don't want to give us what we didn't create this situation, you did. And I don't know who you're hiring, or I don't know what you're telling them to do or not telling them to do, but I just don't see any reason to grant you relief from any of these tree requirements. I mean, if the simple thing would have been just to not cut them down, and then they would fall where they may, if you will. I mean, woods are woods, right? Trees fall, and when you have a storm like we did, stuff happens. But that's no reason to say, oh, the trees were dead. I don't think they were dead. I mean, there were woods there. Aerials showed that when we first gave you the first plan. And came back, and what you're doing is not replacing a forest. It's doing some boundary screening, and that's not what we asked you to do. So that's my position.
Can I just say something, Mr. Chairman? I take full responsibility for what went wrong. I said it the last time, and I'm going to say it again. And honest to God, if I could go back and do this all over again, I would do it differently. It's been an excruciating year for me. It's caused me physical problems, emotional problems, you name it. I don't know what else I could have done. I was thinking plant 124 trees. We went out of our way, we planted 127 trees. I am going to drop everything I'm doing to take care of those trees and make sure they come out nicely and they survive. Whatever I have to do, I have a job, I have a day job, I am not a contractor, I am just a regular guy. I don't even have a company. I wish I was a company, I had a lot of money, no, I am just a homeowner who has a dream, and I'm trying to make that dream come true. So I am not a contractor, I'm not a homeowner. I don't have anything else to offer except to take full responsibility for what happened. I made a good faith effort. I planted 127 trees, and I'm just coming in front of the board and asking for relief.
Well, I'm not sure the survey that I have from the TRC here really suggests you planted 127 trees, but even if you did, there was a tree mitigation plan, and what you've got there doesn't look like that. And again, I'm sympathetic to your situation, even if it was your own making, but you're accepting responsibility, and yet you're not, because you want us to grant you relief from this and basically let the town live with your mistakes, and I just can't do that.
It sounds like, since we're not supposed to consider financial hardships, that what you need to be doing is going to a bank for a loan.
Well, he did that. I'm not going to tell you how to. We're not up here to tell you how to get out of this. I don't know, but all I know is, the easy way to do it would have been to just not be a little more careful.
Mr. K, I'm having trouble. You mentioned this in the TRC report, the number. You keep saying 127 trees, but as the chairman just said, the survey that you submitted in February has about 80-something. And some portion of that is existing trees. So I don't see, I mean, did you confirm that your contractor planted 127?
Yes, sir, I can confirm that. I counted it myself.
But that's not what your surveyor counted.
Well, I got an easy suggestion. If you want to prove to us that your contractor planted 127 trees, I'm sure he has a receipt for 127 trees. Show it to us. You don't need to go out there and count it, right? If I buy a tree, I pretty much have a receipt for it. Hey.
Mr. Orsini, I did not buy 127 trees from one person. As I said, I got majority of the trees from, I forget the name of the farm in upstate New
Okay,
York.
it doesn't matter if you got them from 16 places. Every one of those places should give you a receipt for your purchase. I mean, it's generally the way business is done. So, I mean, that's the easy way to do it. I'm not going to waste 5 minutes or 10 minutes or really 1 minute trying to figure out whether you planted 127 trees or half that or 3/4 of that. If we went out there and counted it, which is more than we ought to be doing with whatever escrow we have, then I would think that the easiest way to do it was just produce those receipts, and then we know that the trees were planted. That's the simple way to do it.
I don't know what else I can say to the board.
I'm not sure that you can say anything else to the board.
I will
Yeah, can I just say something quickly?
Yes, by all means.
As part of your due diligence, right, you ask probably a farmer or a contractor to help you to supply some materials, right? You have to validate when it's delivered. And also, aside from that, you can, through the receipt of what was purchased, and show it as part of your proof that all these things were assembled at a time. Just for the benefit of doubt, if you can show to the board, especially to me, that you have all those information on with you, I will be okay with your explanation, because coming here to give excuses will not help. I believe in somebody giving me facts rather than trying to confuse me. That will go a long way in satisfying my own, should I say, curiosity about what is going on. I'm sorry for your loss, but the fact still remains that for validation purposes, we need those things to show that you follow the due diligence. You are very careful about the way you contract your job out or the work. And as a result, most of us will be convinced that this guy was doing the right thing. Otherwise, I won't take it for a face value. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comments?
Well, with regard to the sidewalk, when you say it's a $10,000 job, is that based on an actual quote from a reputable contractor, or is that, where'd you arrive at that?
I called the gentleman who did the press curb. I asked him, if you replace the sidewalk in front of 1105 Hamilton, how much would it be? Now, he didn't give me something in writing, but he did tell me it would be $10,000.
With the little sympathy for this situation that I have, what I might be able to consider, and of course, it's up to the board, I don't even know if it's possible to do this, but maybe work, I know there is an existing sidewalk. It actually is important to have the connection because it goes the whole length of Hamilton Street. But is there any possibility that maybe we could have a public works inspection and determine if it can be repaired to the satisfaction of public works? Maybe that would cut down on some of the costs. I don't know if that's possible. If it's not, I don't have any other suggestions, and I really don't have too much sympathy in terms of the trees.
In regard to the sidewalk, it's in a county right-of-way, so the township has no responsibility. However, I believe that the building department, prior to his CO, makes sure all things are in proper order. So if there is in disrepair, they still may not get their CO.
Yes, Bob.
Question.
Bob, use your mic.
I am. It should be, oh, okay. Okay. It showed up green, but it's greener now. During the construction, inadvertently, did equipment come through Hamilton Street, and was the sidewalk damaged at all from what it had been before construction began?
No, sir. There was no way to get into the lot from Hamilton. If you're familiar, if you look at the drawing, my house is in the back. I have a driveway, so that's what we used. You know, we will go in and then come in through to the front lot, which is 604.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
If I can come in. Basically, what you're asking the board for is to give you relief so you don't have to do the sidewalk, right?
Yes, sir.
I don't know if this is possible. Probably the board can say, we can give you a little bit of time, if that's possible, but you can go back and do that at a later date, you know, or by virtue of the fact that you've lost industries, which, I mean, I sympathize with you, but I think the board has to, we have our own responsibility, which we have to do. And if there's anything, the board, if it's possible, maybe the board can give you a little bit of extension. You can get your finances together and just say.
Can I answer that, sir? So when we came in front of the board, I know the recommendation was that because of, I guess, there's no sidewalk on Girard Avenue, the recommendation was that I make a contribution to the sidewalk fund. I am not sure what that contribution would have been, but I, as I said, voluntarily said, why don't I repair the sidewalk that is in bad shape on Hamilton? If the board would be kind enough to let me proceed with this project, because I honestly just don't have, and I know it's nobody's responsibility, it's mine, I don't have any means to come up with additional funds. At the minimum, let me finish this house, let me get rid of it, and then when I try to do the second house, the board can hold me to either make a contribution, a significant contribution to a sidewalk fund, or repair the sidewalk. I think that can be done. Let me finish this project, let me get it out of the way, let me have some money coming in, otherwise I'm gonna lose everything. I still have the additional lot that I want to develop. I will come in front of the board again. If it pleases the board, I can agree to make a contribution to a sidewalk fund or repair the sidewalk at that point, whatever the township or the county decides on.
See, though, here's the problem I have. You've got a little bit of a history now with the board, and I'm pretty sure with the staff too, of not exactly representing things the way they are in real life. And so if we were to kick this can down the road, some other contractor is going to screw you over and dig the foundation 6 feet too big. You're going to knock down a whole bunch more trees. and you're gonna come back to us with the same problem. You want something, you want a house that you wanna sell, you want a CO, and you wanna leave us in a condition that we did not approve. You know, Ed probably remembers, I'm sure Bob Metler remembers, this whole neighborhood, the reason we had those woods preserved is because together with the home and the historic house whose name escapes me, Tulip Wood, there was actually, I remember when, I think it was the people who owned Tulip Wood came before the board and wanted to preserve it. There was an opportunity to, I think, about 11 acres of woods and open space in one of the more developed portions of town, to acquire it through Tulip Wood, the nursing home, and your property. And if we could preserve that, you know, that would really help that character of town. And so we did it with sort of a holistic view, right? And so that's why it's important to me. But in your specific circumstance, you know, your credibility is not really high with this board, certainly with me. I guess I can't speak for the whole board, but let me walk that back. It's not high with me. You know, you come in here now 3 times, you agreed to the stuff, and now you come in here for relief every time. I have no reason to think that if you were to proceed with this project to go on to the next one, that's not going to screw up somehow there too and do the same thing. So, I mean, I don't see any condition for is such that the board, from a planning legal perspective, needs to or is compelled to grant any. I mean, this is not a hardship. This is not, other than self-created hardship, which the board doesn't have responsibility for. Ed?
I'd just like to comment on the sidewalk. You know, I'm also a council member, and my fellow council members from time to time see something being developed without sidewalks, and they say, how could the planning board approve that without sidewalks? So it's usually someplace well removed from any other sidewalks. But here we have a property with a sidewalk along Hamilton Street that needs repair. This is an important sidewalk to have in good shape. So it ought to be done. And you agreed to this instead of making a contribution to the sidewalk fund for Gerard Street. I think it's much more important to have the sidewalk on Hamilton be in good shape. We ought to have a continuous sidewalk from Franklin Boulevard to Middlebush. And we don't. But I don't want to see it get any worse.
All right, we do need to open. I think we've got the gist of what the board thinks.
Yeah, can I quickly add something to what Dr. Shea just said?
Yeah, please.
I witnessed an accident. A friend of my son was knocked down because there was no sidewalk around their area or on Hamilton Street. So what Dr. Shea was saying is, for humanity's sake, if there's a sidewalk, that guy who spent almost 3 weeks in the emergency at Robert Wood wouldn't have been knocked down because he would have been walking on the sidewalk. So that is personal to me. If you want to do the right thing, I think there won't have been any need for this coming here to ask for postponement or giving me additional time. It's just for doing the right thing at the right time. Because I witnessed the last time I saw you here, we were able to grant your request. But for now, it's going to be difficult on my own part. I'm just being sincere to say I want to grant you an extension. When before you have not been able to be in compliance with what you intended to do, giving excuses. And if you continue to do this, I think the whole thing, it will appear that we are not taking our responsibility right here on the board, that somebody is trying to cajole us in believing that he's going to do something. Meanwhile, you come with excuses and we will not be able to come out strongly and say, okay, we have to be firm. Anything that apply to one person should be carried over to the another person instead of giving unnecessary exceptions. That's my own belief. And because it's very personal. When you see a lot of people being knocked down because they cannot walk on a sidewalk, it's because of something like this. Oversight. If you don't have complete oversight, then working on the board is it will be irrelevant. That's my own assessment.
I just want to say again that there is a sidewalk on Hamilton. It's just that some areas of the sidewalk is in bad shape, but there is a sidewalk. It's properly paved, just that there's some areas that are a little bit unequal. I don't know if there's anything I can say again. I pleaded to the board and Mr. Orsini. I want to show you, sir, I am a man of integrity. I am a man of my words. I am really sorry that things have gone this way and that you have this impression of me, but that's not me.
Well, just comply with what we've got.
It was explained to you by Carl Hauk with our engineering department that you won't get certificate of occupancy of the house if the sidewalk is in disrepair. So you need to have that sidewalk in good repair before you can get the certificate of occupancy for somebody to move into that house. Am I right, Carl? That's what he explained.
It's one of the departments.
We have no control over that. Our engineering department requires that. That's the law.
All right, so we have to. I think we've probably come full circle. So let's open. We need to open to the public, and then we can vote. Can I have a motion to open to the public on this?
Make a motion to open to the public at this time.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone from the public wishing to come forward?
Seeing no one coming forward, I would move the public portion be closed.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Can I please ask a question?
Yes.
After the board votes, can you please tell me specifically what I need to do next? Because I am really...
I can tell you exactly what you need to do next. What was in your plan that we approved the last time you were here? That's what you need to do.
No,
it's
but
all written
what
out.
I'm saying is we already planted. Do I need to take these trees out? And I don't know what...
No, I don't want you to take any trees out. I want you to make it look like the mitigation plan that we agreed to when you came here the last time. It's really simple. That's what we granted you relief, if you will, and you came back with this mitigation plan since you clear-cut the site when you were told not to. And now you have to execute on that plan. That's what you have to do. I want you to take anything out. I want you to make it look like the plan was supposed to. That's all.
But could he also provide receipts for the 127
Yeah, you can
trees?
provide receipts if you need need to prove that so they're counting. They can't quite tell what it is you planted and what was originally there, but as their best guess, it doesn't look like it was 127. So if you say it was 127, show us some proof.
Right.
Charles is right.
Okay.
And that might be a good practice going forward as you continue to plant. I appreciate that not all species and not all things are available from nurseries. Given a year where there's a lot of storms and there's ice, trees don't make it. The Shade Tree Commission had a sale this year. They couldn't offer as many red buds because the grower just didn't have them. I know that happens. But, there's lots of nurseries and there's lots of different, and I'm sure the township would work with you in good faith if you said, well, I can't find this species, give me another one to replace it with. That's one thing. Saying you're not going to do it, you're not going to plant the trees as that mitigation plan, that's a whole nother thing. So,
Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that if it was a matter of switching up some species, he would not be before the board. I think,
no, he's
Mr.
asking
Chairman,
for relief of conditions, and that's not going to.
I think you summarized it very well, meaning, when you look at the plan on page 3, there's a big, large area in the middle of the site that was supposed to be replanted. And when you look at the plan on page 4, just visually, you can tell it's not what the board approved last year.
Oh, that's abundantly clear. I drive by that quite a bit, and I know exactly what's being done. And I see things being planted, but I don't see what's in the mitigation plan. And the survey proves that without a doubt.
There's another concern I have too. In the 30-plus years I've been coming to these meetings, no one has ever come in on a project and said they couldn't landscape it because they were unable to obtain the plants. So maybe somehow someone can direct him to a nursery that can supply plants. And as Mark said, the variety might be flexible on the types and varieties, but I just don't understand. Maybe if you go in the fall, in September, October, November, supplies are limited, but I don't look at that as a valid issue either.
We get substitution requests all the time. That's, they can't get one particular type of evergreen tree, and if they replace it with something very similar.
Well, I think that the spruce trees that he was replacing the white pines with, after hauling thousands of branches to the curb in the last couple of weeks that were all white pine, is probably his benefit. But I just don't see, I'm not convinced that's a problem, that you can't get the plants.
Ask one last question. So if I bring the receipts, I'm going to try my best. If I can't get the receipts, I'll go back to the companies to give me a letter showing how many I bought from them.
Did you have a landscaper do this?
Yes, I had. He's right here on, what do you call it, Hamilton BGO Landscaping. He came out and planted.
Well, if he did he buy them for you?
No. I personally went to New York. I drove to upstate New York. I made arrangements to have the plants trucked over to New Jersey for me, and I paid for them.
Oh, well,
so I can show you.
Here's a suggestion.
Okay.
In the future, maybe just leave it in the hands of the landscaper. Because it really doesn't seem, at least my impression is, that anything you're sort of handling on your own is turning out all that well. So, like, people who dig the foundation, or you might want to research that a little bit more. People who provide trees for a living know where to get them. You shouldn't have to be running to New York State to source them. You get a landscaper, they should be able to provide them. I mean, that's what their job is. So you're making just everything harder on yourself. I mean, just do what's in the damn plan.
But
all right, I've had enough of this. So somebody, I make a
I'll
motion.
make a motion to not allow this application.
I'll second that.
Councilman Chase?
Yes.
Laurel Hauk?
Yes.
Seal McIver?
Yes.
Robert Mettler?
Yes.
Mustafa Manzray?
Yes.
Charles Brown?
I would like to abstain from voting.
Mr. Thomas?
Just to be clear, this was a motion made in the negative, right? So a yes is a no.
A yes is an agreement to decline.
Of conditions.
Jennifer Ragnow?
Yes.
And Chairman Orsini?
Yes. Okay, so that's all we have. We don't have anything else tonight, Mark? No. Oh, good. So, April.
Oh, yeah.
What
The
is
only
it?
thing I wanted to remind you
Yeah.
guys is the
Use the
special meeting on
Yep.
Tuesday.
That's what I'm saying. yeah.
Everybody's answered.
May 4th.
so.
Yeah, and then we have a regular meeting on the May 2nd, as of now, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
How long is that Tuesday meeting going to take?
How long is it going to take?
Yes.
The
Less
meeting-
time than it takes to get to the council meeting, because Ted wanted it at 6:30 so he could make the council meeting, which I think starts at 7:30. So not longer than that for sure, but actually probably a lot less.
The only item on the special agenda will be the master plan.
Okay.
So it was all sent to you all, right?
Fair share plan.
Fair
Yes.
share.
Fair share.
Fair
You
share.
said the next regular meeting's May 2nd?
Regular.
That is
meeting.
correct.
Any issues?
But,
Yes, Bob?
it is a public hearing though, isn't it?
Yes, it has
Yeah.
been noticed in the paper, and it is listed as a special meeting, and it's been, it's,
But it will
So-
be in the large conference room, not in this room.
Yeah, but part of the answer would also be how many people show up and how long they want to talk. So,
That is certainly a consideration.
yeah, okay.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Second,
Aye.